It's July 2023, and last week was the 77th anniversary of the King David Hotel bombing in Jerusalem. Actually, there are multiple anniversaries here because the USS Liberty, which is an American ship, was also blown up in June during the Six-Day War, so 1967, 8th of June. And, King David Hotel bombing was July 22nd, 1946. So there are multiple anniversaries here of Israeli Zionist terrorism that I wanted to talk about because they're very important. And of course, the Lavon affair, which is another issue. And I wanted to kind of get into all of them to show you that Israel has not just a tendency towards extremism and violence, but was founded from the very beginning on these things, right? You shouldn't think that, well, Israel is becoming violent because, there are people protesting against Netanyahu and now it was a democracy and now it's going to fall into tyranny. No. This is nothing new. So originally, how this started out is you had Zionism as a political ideology that was created in Europe, okay? And the idea was that European Jews, notably European Jews, but Jews in the diaspora in general, would emigrate to Palestine, okay? And based on this political ideology, okay, Zionism is a political ideology. It's not a religion. It's not a race. It's a political ideology. Based on that, they would take Palestine and turn it into Israel, right, by force. So you have waves of people that are going from Poland, from Ukraine, from basically everything that was the Russian Empire, mostly, right? I mean, if you look at the list of Israeli prime ministers, every single Israeli prime minister in history is Eastern European, right? The first, Ben Gurion, for example, where was he born? Former Russian Empire, right? All of them. If they weren't born in the Russian Empire or Eastern Europe, then it's either their parents or grandparents. Doesn't change the fact that they emigrated there and then took up arms. And how did this start? Well, first you had something called the Bar Giora, right? So Bar Giora is a militia, which is really the precursor to what is today the Israeli army, okay? So very, very violent group, extremely violent, using guerrilla tactics to assassinate Arabs, to assassinate British officers, to assassinate even other Jews, right? So Jews who were not okay with Zionism, who disagreed with Zionism, with this political ideology, they assassinated them too. This is a fact. This is very well historically documented. You can go read something, for example, by Ronan Bergman, where he goes into detail about this. Then after Bar Giora turned into what is known as HaShomer, okay? Became HaShomer. Then HaShomer became the Haganah, okay? And when the Haganah came about, you had a split because you had people in the Haganah. Remember, it's the same, Hebrew, as they called it, Zionist militia, okay? You had a split. And out of the Haganah, you had the Stern Gang, okay, so also called Lehi, and you had the Irgun, all right? Now, Irgun and Lehi, they believed in being even more extremist. But at the end of the day, it's the same people, really. I mean, they all went on to become the IDF. They all went on to become the prime ministers of Israel. So what's the difference? It's not like there was much wiggle room. By the time they disagreed with each other, and we're talking about the King David Hotel bombing, for example, it's already 1946. What's there left to disagree about? 2 years later, they've taken Palestine. So in any case, the King David Hotel bombing, look at this. This is the headquarters in Jerusalem of the British Empire, the British mandate in Palestine. And that's what they did to it. Okay? They blew it up. These are, again, European Jews of the Irgun. Now, the Haganah, as I told you, they had a split with Haganah. Haganah claimed that, they called off the operation at the last second, and they were not okay with this, and then they helped, MI5 and SIS track down members of Irgun and so on. But, they helped plan it. This entire plan came out of Haganah and Irgun working together. That's a fact. So they blew it up. They killed 96 people. 96 people. Most of them were working for the British government. Okay, so 28 of them were British, 41 Arabs. There were even 17 Jews among the dead. So you see how indiscriminate this is. This is not about, the Israelis targeting, their quote unquote enemies. They don't give a crap. They were killing other Jews, everybody, right? The same groups that I mentioned before. Nothing has changed. And this is funny because in their point of view, the Zionist militias back then, they thought that this is acceptable violence because the goal is to liberate Palestine and then turn it into Israel. Okay, that this is their homeland, even though they all come from Poland and Ukraine. But somehow it's their homeland, and that justifies this violence. It's funny because when Palestinians who you have documented proof, they literally have keys to the houses, deeds to the land. They can prove going back 10, 20 generations that they have lived in this land, Palestinians. When they try to take up arms, which is their right, by the way, this is enshrined in the Geneva Convention and the UN Charter. When they do that, they're called terrorists, right? How many times have you heard Israel call Palestinian resistance fighters terrorists? Or not just Israel, but the UK and the US and the West in general. There's no difference here, right? It's the same thinking. It's like, this is my homeland and I'm going to do whatever it takes to liberate it. The difference here is that the Israelis have no claim to this because they are European. They are Ashkenazi. They're, from Poland, from Ukraine, from Russia. They blew this up. They blew this up because you had stations, MI5 stations, MI6 or SIS stations here. So they basically put bombs in a bunch of milk cans, milk tins, and they put them in the basement. And it was so powerful that basically the entire hotel collapsed. And that's what happened. 96 people killed. And the Israelis claim that they issued phone calls in advance, right? It's kind of like when they bomb Palestinian buildings, residential buildings, and they say, listen, we're going to call you 10 minutes before we destroy your entire life, and that means you should get out. Oh, well, thank you very much. So the Israelis claim that this whole bombing is the fault of the British. It's our fault because we didn't evacuate the hotel fast enough. So the thing is actually that the French, there was a wing, one of the wings of this hotel was also part of the French consulate, right? So you have a lot of things going on here, right? This hotel was basically the headquarters for, as I said, British intelligence, the British mandate in Palestine, but also one wing was belonged to the French and so on. So the Israelis claim they called one of the operators downstairs at the switchboard, and the call was ignored, apparently, according to them. Then they say that they called the French consulate, right? So the other wing in this hotel. And then they claim they called a newspaper, which then notified the British. But it turns out all of this was a lie. They cooked this up in order to frame the British. And to add insult to injury, in 2006, Israel unveiled a plaque at the hotel, right? Because they annexed and invaded all of this. This is the plaque which they unveiled. So they had a conference, and Netanyahu, who is now the prime minister again, but in 2006 he was no longer the prime minister. He was gone for a little while. He attended this conference, and they were basically commemorating a terrorist attack. And the plaque read, this is something unbelievable. The plaque read that, to reasons known only to the British government, the hotel was not evacuated. So you see again this mentality, like, we are going to blow this hotel up, and if anybody dies, it's your fault because you didn't evacuate it. Wow. Even Haaretz, this is an Israeli newspaper, Haaretz. I want you to read what they say here because I think it's beautiful how they point out this hypocrisy. Okay? Look at what they said here. They said if Netanyahu's office were to receive a bomb threat, do you think he would evacuate? And then, were he to fail to evacuate, that he would then blame it upon himself? Of course not. This is an Israeli newspaper saying this, not me. Just to show you how hypocritical this is. And this is so insulting, this plaque. This is so insulting that they had the British government and the British embassy protested, and they had to change the text, but only in English. So you see the plaque is in Hebrew on the top, and in the bottom it's in English. They only changed the English text, and the one in Hebrew, from my understanding, I don't read Hebrew, but if anybody does, please feel free to chime in. This is reported everywhere and well documented that the text in Hebrew was not changed, and it remains unaltered, and this plaque is still there, and it blames our government for not evacuating the hotel fast enough, which I think is I mean, you know, calling this insulting is a little mild. It's a little mild. Okay. Now you need to understand something, because the threat of Zionist terrorism was so big that at the end of World War II, remember this is 1946, MI5 were more concerned with Israeli terrorism, with Zionist terrorism, than the Soviets. So let that sink in, because people, you know, they think like World War II was, you know, the Soviets and the British and the Americans and Canadians and, you know, Anzac fighting, and the Chinese fighting against the Axis powers. And then once they were done, you had the Soviets versus the West, right? It's not true. The main concern for MI5, at least, were Zionist cells, because the Zionist militias like Haganah and Irgun were planning attacks inside the UK. And they carried them out. They delivered on these threats, right? So they blew up the Colonial Club in London, right? Although, given its name, I'm not sure there will be too many who'll weep. But nevertheless, you know, it's a terrorist attack. Then on top of that, they tried to blow up Whitehall, but the timer failed, so the bomb didn't go off. But if it had gone off, it would have been just as bad as King David Hotel in Whitehall, right? And when it comes to immigration, every single Jewish person in the Middle East who wanted to take out a visa to go to the United Kingdom at the end of World War II, every single one was scrutinized by MI5 and the security services. Every single one. That is how I'm trying to illustrate to you how serious this threat of Zionist terrorism was to the United Kingdom, which helped create Israel, right? Remember Balfour Declaration, 1917, and then this becomes such a headache, all of this, that the UK just dumps it onto the UN. And of course, the Americans are not helping the UK, because, you know, the Israeli lobby is much, much stronger and receives a lot more funding and support in the United States versus the UK. And so, you know, the US becoming the new superpower and overshadowing France and the UK. What can you do, right? I mean, it doesn't make it any better, but I'm just trying to explain to you that there was the UK at this point, even if it had wanted to put a stop to, you know, the creation of Israel, which I doubt it did, it couldn't have anyway, because the United States was funding and supporting Zionism so much that the UK had no say in this, right? Remember, the final nail in the coffin is the Suez Canal crisis, but that's later. That's a decade later. So just going back to the British approach, you know, in 1939, there was something called the White Paper, which is basically a decree limiting the number of Jewish migrants to Palestine to around 75,000 per year. Okay, so this was a cap. And once again, at the end of World War II, just to illustrate how serious this was taken, the threat of Israeli terrorism, this cap was not lifted. Okay, so it was kept in place. Now, the Israelis, as I said, they were sending, you know, putting bombs all over London. They were also sending bombs from throughout Europe in letter bombs, and even in books, right? So they pride themselves in being the inventors of the book bomb. Outrageous. Truly, truly outrageous. And this plaque, this disgusting plaque, like Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, is commemorating a terrorist attack against British officers. What the hell is that shit? If the people in Whitehall had any self-respect, a shred of self-respect, they would have called the UK ambassador back to London and kicked the Israeli embassy out and severed ties. Try doing that. Try commemorating an attack against Israelis and see what happens to you. See how they will hit the fucking roof. Oh my God, you're anti-Semitic. Oh, you're a terrorist. Oh, you're this and that. But it's okay for the Israelis to blow us up, to kill us, and then commemorate it and unveil a plaque. You know, they're proud of themselves. Wow, we're so brave. You know, we invented book bombs and letter bombs and blew up a hotel full of Jews, full of Arabs, full of British officers. Now, granted, there should have been no British secretary in Palestine in the first place. I'm the first one to tell you that. But don't let the Israelis fool you for a second. They are terrorists, and they have no claim and no justification for this behavior. None whatsoever. These are people from Poland, from Ukraine. You know, right-wing people, they like to complain about refugees, quote-unquote, invading Europe. Jesus, you should see what Europeans do when they go to Africa and Asia. You want to talk about invasions? You want to talk about an invasion? Israel is an invasion, literally an invasion. Not refugees, paramilitaries, fanatics, extremists. Only a fanatic behaves like this. This is fanaticism. It's extremism, religious extremism. And again, I told you before, ISIS, Israel, the Crusaders, they all hijack religion and use it as a political vehicle. Israel is no different. And they are not our friends and not our allies.